The station had no name anymore. The sign above the cracked archway had long ago rusted into an unreadable smear, its letters eaten by time and rain. People in the nearby village simply called it the old place, and they avoided it after sunset. Not because of superstition, they would insist, but because nothing good ever came from going there at night. And yet, on a cold autumn evening, Daniel found himself standing before it, breath fogging in the air, heart beating with a mixture of curiosity and unease. He had missed the last bus home, and the shortcut through the woods had brought him here. The tracks stretched into darkness on both sides like black veins disappearing into the earth. The station itself leaned slightly, as if tired of standing, its windows hollow and broken like empty eyes. A single bench remained on the platform, its wood warped and damp. Daniel checked his phone. No signal, no battery left. He sighed and stepped under the archway. The air inside was colder, unnaturally so, like walking into a cellar filled with unseen ice. The silence was thick, pressing against his ears, broken only by the faint creak of old wood shifting somewhere above. He told himself it was just the wind, even though the trees outside were perfectly still. He moved further in. The waiting room still had remnants of its past. A ticket counter with shattered glass, a faded timetable pinned crookedly to the wall, and a clock that had stopped at 2:17. His footsteps echoed too loudly, as if the room were much larger than it appeared. He sat on the bench, trying to calm himself. "Just wait until morning," he muttered. "It's nothing." Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time felt strange there, stretching and compressing like a living thing. Then he heard it, a faint sound at first, distant and almost indistinguishable from the whisper of wind. A low metallic hum, followed by the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks. Daniel froze. Trains hadn't passed through this station in decades. He stood slowly, heart-pounding, and stepped back onto the platform. The sound grew louder. A train was coming. He could see it now. A dim light in the distance, approaching far too quickly. The rails began to vibrate beneath his feet, and the air filled with the smell of rust and something else, something sour and rotten. The train emerged from the darkness, its form wrong somehow. The cars were old, far older than any modern train, their paint peeling and their windows black. The headlight flickered weakly, casting jerky shadows across the platform. As it screeched to a halt before him, Daniel felt an overwhelming urge to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The doors slid open with a groan that sounded almost like a sigh, and then he saw them. Passengers. They sat inside, perfectly still, faces pale and expressionless, their eyes, if they were open at all, stared straight ahead, unblinking. Some looked normal at first glance, but the longer he stared, the more he noticed what was wrong. One man's head tilted too far to one side, as if his neck had snapped. A woman's mouth hung open unnaturally wide, her jaw stretched beyond human limits. Another figure's reflection in the window did not match its position, lagging behind like a delayed shadow. "Boarding," a voice whispered behind him. Daniel spun around. There was no one there. The voice came again, closer this time. "Boarding." He turned back toward the train. One of the passengers had moved, now standing in the doorway blocking the entrance. It was a conductor, or at least something wearing a conductor's uniform. The hat was crooked, and the coat hung loosely over a thin, unnatural frame. The face beneath was pale, almost gray, and the eyes were sunken deep into darkness. "Ticket," the figure said, its voice hollow, as though echoing from somewhere far away. Daniel shook his head. I don't have one." The conductor smiled, and the smile was wrong. It stretched too far, exposing teeth that were uneven and far too many. "Then you will ride anyway." The words sent a chill through Daniel's entire body. He stepped back instinctively, but the platform seemed longer now, stretching away as if the station itself were shifting. "No," he said, "I'm not getting on." The conductor tilted its head slowly, studying him. "You already have." Daniel's stomach dropped. He glanced down at his feet. They were no longer on the platform. He was standing just inside the train. He hadn't moved, or at least he didn't remember moving. The door slammed shut behind him. The train lurched forward with a violent jolt, throwing him off balance. He grabbed onto a nearby pole, his hands trembling. "Wait, stop!" he shouted, but the train only picked up speed. The windows remained black, showing no sign of the outside world. The passengers sat in silence, unmoving, as if unaware of his presence, or perhaps deliberately ignoring it. Daniel stumbled down the aisle, desperate to find another door, another way out. "Hello?" he called. "Is anyone—" A hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. He gasped, looking down. The hand belonged to a young girl sitting in one of the seats. Her grip was impossibly strong. Her head turned slowly to face him, her movements jerky and unnatural. "You shouldn't walk," she whispered. Her voice sounded like it was coming from deep underwater. "You'll wake them." "Wake who?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a breath. The girl's eyes widened, and then, all at once, the other passengers began to move. Their heads turned toward him in perfect unison. Eyes opened, mouths stretched into silent screams. The train lights flickered violently, plunging the car into brief moments of darkness. In those flashes, Daniel saw things that made his blood run cold. The passengers were not whole. Some were missing limbs, others had wounds that never bled. Some faces were twisted beyond recognition, as if crushed or burned or broken in ways no living body could survive. "Next stop," the conductor's voice echoed through the car. The end of the line. The train began to slow. The passengers rose from their seats one by one, their movements stiff and unnatural. They began to shuffle toward him. Daniel pulled free from the girl's grip and ran. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the cold hands brushing against him, the whispers filling his ears. Stay with us. Don't leave." At the end of the car, he found a door. He threw it open and stumbled into the next carriage. This one was different. Empty. But the walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges that looked like they had been made by fingernails. The floor was stained dark, and the air smelled overwhelmingly of decay. The door behind him slammed shut. He tried to open it again, but it wouldn't budge. Slow footsteps echoed from the far end of the carriage. The conductor emerged from the shadows, walking toward him with that same unnatural smile. "You cannot leave. it said. "This train has no exits." "Why?" Daniel demanded, backing away. "What is this place?" The conductor stopped a few feet from him, its head tilted again, almost curious. "This is where they go," it said softly. "The ones who were forgotten, the ones who waited too long." Daniel's mind raced. "I'm not supposed to be here," he said. "This is a mistake." The conductor's smile widened impossibly. "No mistakes." The train came to a complete stop. The lights went out completely. For a moment there was nothing but darkness. And then Daniel heard the doors open. A rush of cold air filled the carriage, carrying with it a sound like distant screaming. "Your stop," the conductor whispered. Daniel turned toward the open doorway. Beyond it was not a station, not a platform, but an endless void of shifting shadows. Shapes moved within it, twisting and reaching as if alive. He stepped back. No, hands grabbed him from behind. The passengers. They had followed him. Their grip was unbreakable, dragging him toward the door. "No, let me go!" he screamed, thrashing wildly. But they were too strong. The conductor watched, its expression unchanged. All passengers must disembark. With one final pull, they threw him into the darkness. Daniel fell, screaming, as the shadows closed around him, wrapping tight, dragging him deeper and deeper. The last thing he saw before everything went black was the train pulling away, its dim light fading into the void. And then silence. The next morning, a man from the village passed by the old station on his way to work. He paused, noticing something strange. For the first time in years, the clock inside the waiting room was ticking again. It read 2:18, and on the bench sat a single figure, perfectly still, a young man, his face pale, his eyes staring straight ahead, unblinking, waiting. The man approached slowly, his boots scraping against the cracked platform, each step hesitant, as if the ground itself might give way beneath him. He had passed this station countless times, yet never had he seen anyone here, not in the morning, not in daylight, and certainly not sitting so still it felt deliberate, as though placed rather than arrived. "Hello?" he called, his voice thin against the heavy silence. The figure did not respond, did not blink, did not breathe. As far as the man could tell, he climbed the platform, heart beginning to pound, an unease settling deep in his chest. The air felt wrong again, too cold for the early morning, too thick, as if something unseen lingered just beyond sight. "Are you all right?" he asked, stepping closer. The young man's clothes were damp, stained with something dark along the sleeves and collar. His hands rested limply on his knees, but the fingers twitched, just once, so subtly it could have been imagined. Relief flickered. The man reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder. The reaction was immediate. The young man's head snapped toward him with a sharp, inhuman motion, eyes wide, eyes hollow, eyes that reflected no light. "You shouldn't have touched me," the young man whispered. His voice cracked, layered, as though more than one voice spoke at once. The man stumbled back in shock, nearly losing his footing. What happened to you?" he stammered. The young man's lips trembled, then curled into a faint, broken smile. "I missed my stop." A distant sound cut through the air, the low metallic hum. The man's blood ran cold. "Do you hear that?" the young man asked softly. The man shook his head instinctively. There's nothing. But there was. The sound grew louder, a vibration beneath the platform, a familiar, impossible rhythm. The tracks began to tremble. The young man stood slowly this time with unnatural precision, like a puppet being pulled upright by invisible strings. It's back, he said. It always comes back. The man turned toward the tracks, panic rising. There was nothing there, no light, no train, and yet the sound continued, approaching rapidly. We have to leave, the man said, grabbing the young man's arm, but his grip met resistance. The young man did not move. You can't leave, he said calmly. Not anymore. The man's breath quickened. What are you talking about? The young man's eyes shifted past him, fixing on something behind. The man hesitated, then slowly turned. The station archway, the empty doorway leading into the waiting room. Something stood inside it, a figure, tall, thin, wearing a crooked hat. The conductor. The man's throat tightened. No, he whispered. The figure did not move, yet somehow it felt closer than before, its presence pressing against the air itself. Ticket, it said. The man shook his head frantically. I don't have one. I'm just passing through. The conductor tilted its head just as it had before. You stopped. Its voice echoed unnaturally, stretching the words beyond their natural length. That is enough. The ground trembled violently now. The sound of the train was deafening, though still nothing could be seen on the tracks. The young man's grip tightened suddenly around the man's wrist, far stronger than before. Don't fight it, he whispered. It hurts more if you fight. Let go of me, the man shouted, struggling, but the young man only smiled wider, and now that smile mirrored the conductor's. Too wide, too deep, too wrong. The station lights, though none had worked in years, flickered on for a brief, blinding moment, and in that instant the train appeared. Not arriving, not approaching, already there, slamming into existence with a shriek of metal and air displacement so violent it knocked the man to his knees. The doors were open. The passengers were waiting. This time they were not still. They leaned outward, heads twitching, arms stretching too far, fingers grasping at nothing and everything at once. Boarding, they whispered in unison. The man screamed, trying to crawl away, but the platform seemed to stretch endlessly beneath him, each movement taking him nowhere. The young man stepped calmly toward the train, then paused, looking back. You get used to it, he said quietly. After a while, you stop remembering where you were going. Please, the man cried, help me. For a moment, something flickered in the young man's expression. Hesitation, regret. Then it was gone. He turned and stepped inside. The conductor's gaze shifted to the man still on the ground. Last call, it said. The passengers surged forward. Their hands closed around the man's legs, his arms, his shoulders. He thrashed wildly, screaming, his voice swallowed by the roar of the unseen engine. No, no. They dragged him across the platform, the cold touch of their hands burning like ice against his skin. The doorway loomed closer, darkness beyond it, promising nothing, promising everything. As he was pulled inside, the man caught one last glimpse of the station, the clock in the waiting room ticking. It read 2:19. The doors slammed shut. The train vanished. The silence returned. Later that day, the villagers spoke in hushed tones. A man had gone missing. No trace, no explanation. Some said he had taken the forest path. Others said he must have left town entirely. But one old woman, who had lived there longer than anyone, only shook her head. "The station took him," she said quietly. "It's hungry again." That night the clock ticked once more. 20, and on the bench there were now two figures sitting side by side, still, unblinking, waiting. Their fingers twitched in unison, and far beyond the silent tracks, somewhere in the dark, the train continued its endless journey, never stopping, never slowing, only waiting for the next passenger who lingered just a little too long. Days passed, but the village did not forget. Not this time. There were now whispers that spread faster than reason could silence them. People spoke of the clock, the bench, the figures who appeared where no one had been before. At first, it was only those two, the young man and the one who had tried to help him. But by the third morning, there were three. By the fourth, there were five. No one saw them arrive. No one saw them move. They were simply there, sitting, perfectly still, facing forward. Eyes open, the clock inside the station continued to tick. It had not stopped since it first moved again, and each time a new figure appeared, the minute hand shifted forward exactly once. No more, no less. By the end of the week, it read 2:26. No one dared go near it anymore. Not even in daylight. The path through the woods grew over quickly, as if nature itself was trying to seal the place away. But curiosity is a stubborn thing, and fear, when left to grow, turns into something else. On the seventh night, a group of 4 villagers gathered at the edge of the forest. They carried lanterns, tools, and the kind of determination that comes from believing something must have a rational explanation. "It's just an old structure," one of them insisted. "People are disappearing. There has to be a reason." Another nodded, though his hands trembled. "We check it. We make sure no one's hiding there, that's all." They didn't believe their own words, but they went anyway. The forest was unnaturally quiet as they walked. No insects, no wind, no sound, but their own footsteps and the faint crackle of lantern flames. When the station finally came into view, all 4 of them stopped at once. It looked different, not restored, not repaired, but aware. The darkness inside seemed deeper than it should be, as if the building contained more space than its walls allowed. The clock was visible through the broken window, still ticking. 26. "We go together," the first man said quietly. They climbed onto the platform as one. The bench was there, and the figures, 7 of them now, sitting side by side, perfectly aligned, their clothes different, their faces different, but their stillness identical. One of the villagers let out a sharp breath. Those are people from here." He stepped closer despite himself. "I know them." "Don't," another warned. "Don't get close." But it was too late. The man reached out, trembling, and touched the shoulder of one of the figures. Instantly, all 7 heads turned toward him at once. The lanterns flickered violently. One went out. The man stumbled back in terror. "No, no, no!" The figures stood. Not slowly, not naturally, They rose in perfect synchronization, like a single entity controlling 7 bodies. Their mouths opened, and from them came a sound, not speech, but something deeper, a layered whisper that seemed to come from beneath the ground itself. "Too many," it said. The air dropped in temperature so sharply that frost began to form along the edges of the platform. The remaining lanterns shattered, glass cracking under the sudden cold. Darkness swallowed everything except the faint outline of the station doorway, and within it a familiar shape. The conductor. "Group boarding," it said softly. The ground trembled. The villagers panicked, turning to run. But the forest behind them was gone. In its place was only darkness, an endless stretch of black where no trees stood any more. Where is the path?" someone shouted. "It's gone." The sound of the train erupted all around them, far louder than before. Not approaching, not arriving, already there. The rails screamed, the air warped, and then, like a tear in reality itself, the train appeared again, longer this time, more carriages, stretching impossibly far into the distance, doors open, passengers waiting, not just the ones from before. Now there were more, many more. Faces pressed against the windows, hands clawing at the edges of the doors, smiling, screaming, silent. The 7 figures from the bench began to move toward the villagers, steps perfectly in sync. "Run!" one of the villagers shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The train seemed to surround them now, cars extending far beyond the station itself, impossible geometry folding space inward. The conductor raised a hand. All aboard. The passengers surged forward. The villagers screamed as they were grabbed, pulled, separated. Their lanterns vanished into the chaos. Their voices echoed briefly and then were cut off one by one. Silence returned as quickly as it had broken. The train vanished again, leaving the station exactly as it had been, empty, still, quiet. The clock ticked. 30. The next morning, the village was quieter than ever before. No one spoke about what had happened. Not openly, but everyone knew. The forest path was completely gone now, as if it had never existed. The station could no longer be reached by ordinary means. And yet, some claimed that if you walked far enough at night, if you listened closely, you could still find it, not by sight, but by sound. The faint metallic hum of a train that should not exist. And sometimes, if you were unlucky, you would see a flicker of dim light in the distance, not coming toward you, but waiting for you. And somewhere beyond that darkness, the train continued to run, endlessly, growing with every passenger it claimed, the conductor standing watch, the doors always open. And inside, among the countless silent figures, there were still empty seats.